After the untimely passing of my grandmother Polly in May of that year, I just celebrated my 18th birthday. In addition, I had just finished high school in June of 2015, and I had only had a few months off before beginning my studies at the spa school. After beginning the Advanced Aesthetics program, I anticipated finishing it within the first year. 7th of January, 2016. My boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, asked me if I could pick him up on the way home from the first class of the day, which was mine. He was at his mother's residence at the time. The temperature was about 20 degrees, and it was raining quite softly. I left school about 8:30 p.m., and before I went, I tried to use my GPS to obtain driving instructions from my school to the home where my boyfriend's parents live, but my GPS kept telling me that the address doesn't exist. Because I was the one who knew the bulk of the route there and because I had Bluetooth hands-free calling, we came to the conclusion that he would lead me through the remaining portion of the journey while I drove as far as I could on my own, something that we've done quite a few times in the past. On that particular day, I opted to straighten my hair, and I wore an infinity scarf with an old North Face jacket that I had. When I drove an older silver hatchback Hyundai Elantra GT, the emergency brake was highly wavy, and it made it difficult for me to stop in an emergency. I had taken the incorrect exit and was only about 2 miles away from the Allen Creek exit when I decided to call my boyfriend on my Bluetooth headset while I was stopped at the light. I was getting onto the highway at a speed of around 68 miles per hour when I began hydroplaning. Somehow, my emergency brake worked its way up as I was hydroplaning. I was unable to regain control of my vehicle, and before I knew it, I was spinning out and performing donuts. I immediately began shouting and yelling at my partner to assist me while we were on the phone together. With each donut, I was able to make out the lights of the passing automobiles. I had the impression that I was powerless. I simply continued spinning till it finally ended. I stopped spinning. I took a quick glance out the glass of my driver's side door and saw that I am now traveling in a direction that is perpendicular to both the fast lane and the center lane of the motorway. I am in the fast lane, and I can see bright lights approaching me swiftly. I'm not sure whether I heard this from someone or read it somewhere, but if you're ever in a vehicle accident, simply relax and try not to stiffen up your body. I prayed to God while leaning back in my chair, closing my eyes, letting go of my body, and begging Him not to let me die. It really did seem like a reflex, and I have no idea how to express it. It was as if my body already knew what to do. My whole body jerked about like a rag doll when the vehicle I was in moved, and I can still feel it to this day. I can still hear people cursing at me, shouting, saying I deserve to die, asking me to move my vehicle, telling me I'm a fool, you can still move your car, and that this is all your fault. I can still hear the smashing of metal and the shattering of glass. I can still hear the blaring of horns, except I see nothing but pitch blackness around me. It seemed as if I was only floating above myself, yet all I could see was blackness. In the end, it seemed, everything came to a halt, and my automobile came to a complete stop. I gently begin to open both of my eyes. There is glass all around me, and I can hear vehicles moving around me, driving over all of the bits of my automobile that had been scattered everywhere. I was struck on the driver's side of the hood of my vehicle, about 2 to 4 inches from the driver's door. I eventually became aware of the blood that was streaming down my face from my head as my door was pulled inward towards me. The front of my vehicle was pushed and crushing on my legs, and the front of my car was pushed in. I could feel the blood clinging to my face, coating my hair, and pooling in my scarf. It was everywhere. I was so afraid to move that even though I wanted to take the scarf off my neck, I couldn't. My right wrist was branded all over, and there was a hole in my North Face jacket where the airbag fluid had burnt through and caused the hole. At this point, I have to find a way to go. I was unable to unlock my door, but the window in my room was broken. I felt as if I was imprisoned. There was a lady who was attempting to get around my vehicle. She was so near that I could see that she was talking on the phone. Nonetheless, I stuck my head out the window and began yelling at her. "Help me. Please come to my aid. Help me." She turned her head to look at me, but she did not stop driving. The realization finally dawned on me at that point, and I resigned myself to my fate by leaning back in my seat and telling myself, "Okay, you're going to die here. You're going to die alone. Your parents won't be aware of what just took place, and I'm not even sure if my lover was paying attention to what was going on. I no longer have any hope for the human race." When I looked down at my right wrist, where the airbag fluid had burnt me, I spotted a little branded P on the wound. I became aware that my grandmother was present, and that she was keeping an eye on me. It dawned on me that I wasn't the only one. I did nothing except sit there thinking about how this is it over and over again in my brain. Then, though, a guy came sprinting up to my vehicle. I began pleading him, "Please don't let me die. Please don't let me die. Please help me. Please." He simply carries on trying to put me at ease by grabbing my hand and instructing me to keep squeezing it. He also questioned me in a relaxed manner where I went to school and why I was going there. He did whatever he could think of to try and prevent me from going insane. The moment he starts looking at my head and says, "Oh no," the feeling of terror begins to take hold. Another person armed with a crowbar attempts to force their way into my home. My first automobile was totaled, and 2 other guys pushed their truck into a diagonal position so that other vehicles would not be able to drive through the wreckage of it. They came out of their vehicle, got the passenger door of my vehicle opened, dragged me out of the vehicle, carried me to the shoulder of the motorway, and placed me down there. I'm trembling, but I know how to stop trembling. 3 other males quickly exited their vehicles, snapped a photo of me as we were rushing away, and then returned to their vehicles. Therefore, more people approached me and formed a barrier around me, preventing anybody else from approaching me. Finally, the ambulance arrives, and when the paramedics get there, they inquire what hurts. I inform them my knees, the left top side of my head, my left shoulder where the seatbelt cut in, and the top of my neck. Additionally, I told them where the seatbelt cut in on my left shoulder. They began grilling me with questions about everything. Which automobile do I drive? Where can you find me? Where am I going to get an education? I'm curious, what's your name? Always playing. I simply start replying, again and over. Before I could even process what was happening, they were lying me down on a gurney, placing a neck brace on me, and shoving me into the ambulance. At this point, all I can do is keep requesting that either my mother or someone else call her. They informed me that since I had reached the age of 18, I was considered an adult, and that because of this, they had to treat my wounds before calling someone for me. They transported me to the hospital, and while they were doing so, I overheard the emergency medical technicians explaining to the nurses working in the emergency department that I had been involved in a collision with a semi-truck. This is the first instant that it occurs to me that the lights I saw heading toward me weren't coming from a regular automobile but rather from a full-sized semi-truck. I even inquired in order to gain more information, was it a vehicle or a truck? When the nurse told you that you couldn't have any sweets, you were run over by a semi-truck. When I asked whomever I could find whether they could phone my mother, their response was always the same: no, we have to take care of your wounds first. They lead me into an emergency room where there is a nude elderly guy lying on one of the tables and a room full of interns and younger physicians. They have me sitting on a metal table, and I get the feeling that I'm going to fall off of it at any moment. They immediately begin ripping my clothing off of me. The manner that they would hardly talk to me while cutting everything off of me gave me the impression that I may as well have simply been a dead corpse. The guy sitting next to me was gazing away. A member of the medical staff approaches me and informs me that in order to repair the incision he will need to begin inserting around 3 staple and 13 stitches into my skull. At that moment, I was aware that he had to complete his duties, but I could no longer handle being by myself and need the company of someone I knew. I told him that he has to at least speak with me so that I can have a sense of how it feels before he touches my head or someone else calls my mother. After briefing me on what I might anticipate, he began operating on my head. When I began crying, he covered my eyes with a paper towel, perhaps so that he wouldn't see me crying. The one and only nurse who engaged in conversation with me removed the towel from my eyes, wrapped a blanket over my trembling body, and informed me that she would contact my mother on my behalf. They put the phone on speaker, and all I could hear was my mother's voice telling me that my boyfriend had contacted her when he heard me screaming, and that they are all waiting at the trauma center. When the relief finally hit me, I completely lost it. I tried to suppress the tears, but eventually I gave up. They eventually completed my stitches and rushed me to the emergency hospital. It is close to 12 in the morning, and I am now waiting to be allowed to go in for a number of scans and tests. I had to lie down in a position that was fully horizontal until I had a panic episode brought on by the physician, at which point they sat me up 15 degrees. Although I wasn't permitted to eat or drink, they did provide me with water that I had to sip out of cold sponges. They gave my mother and father permission to enter the room after a long delay. They were shocked to see my face still covered in blood when they walked in, looking at me as if I were crazy and assuring me that everything will be okay and that we will sort out everything that's going on. My mother quickly began to clean the dried blood off of my face as soon as she saw it. After spending some time together, my parents agreed to allow my lover come back to visit me, and we continued our time together. He was giving me directions while he was seated in his living room when all of a sudden he began hearing me yelling his name and loud hammering. He told me how it happened. He said that he was able to hear me screaming, followed by a number of loud crashes. As soon as he heard no sound coming from the phone, he immediately dialed my parents' number to inform them that he believed I had been involved in an accident. After that, he ran to tell his own parents that they should hurry up and leave because I had been involved in an accident. His whole family hopped in the vehicle and headed to the section of the motorway where he believed I was hiding out. Because of the collision, traffic on the motorway was backed up for anywhere between 5 and 7 miles, so they exited the freeway and began their investigation from the gated streets that were located above the freeways. They eventually located my vehicle, and he raced to the nearby police station to inquire about my whereabouts. The officer responded that they had taken me to Grant Hospital. I am very grateful that he came to be with me in the hospital, and that he promptly phoned my parents on my behalf. I felt so much better having him there. They take me away for more testing, and when they bring me back, they tell me that I have to spend the night in the emergency room since the results of the test won't be available until sometime tomorrow. In the trauma room where I was being treated, there was a little chair situated next to my bed, and my partner wanted to remain with me. Because of his height, he was unable to get comfortable in the chair and ended up sleeping on the floor next to my bed instead. The next morning, I was finally moved out of the trauma center and into a room where my family could see me together without having to take turns. When the doctors came in to give me the results of my test, they informed me that I had glass embedded in my hand, that I required 13 stitches and 3 staples in my head, that I had whiplash, a concussion, nerve damage in my knees and left shoulder, and that I had fractured my C2 vertebra, which came dangerously close to paralyzing me. They told me that the only reason they won't do surgery is because of my age, and that they are keeping their fingers crossed that it will get better on its own. It wasn't working very well when the nurses tried to wash some of the dried blood out of my hair, so we ended up tying it up in a bun instead. After receiving the results of my tests, I was allowed to sit up but was required to wear a neck brace. I stayed there for a total of 3 nights, and during that time, my mother and my boyfriend took turns spending the night with me. It was a fight with the nurses each and every night to receive the pain medication that I needed. One night, I awoke in the middle of the night in excruciating agony, and my roommate and I repeatedly punched the button on the wall to get assistance. When my mother stepped out of the room, she observed the nurse seated just beneath the light with the beeping coming from our button being touched. She informed her that I needed my medication immediately, and that I shouldn't have to wait so long for it when I'm in so much agony. I was eventually allowed to leave the hospital, but I had to comply with a number of restrictions. I was unable to move anything weighing more than 5 pounds, I was prohibited from driving, and I was had to wear a neck brace at all times, including when washing and sleeping. We were required to see the doctor every few weeks in order to monitor the condition of both my head and my neck. Every night was a challenge for me to fall asleep, and I couldn't even roll over on my own. Whenever I needed to be turned over throughout the night, my mother would sleep next to me and assist me. As a result of missing numerous days of work and school when I was in the hospital, I was fired from both of my jobs. I was forced to take a sabbatical from my studies. When we would get in the vehicle, particularly on the motorway, I would start to experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. After a total of 7 weeks, I will finally get my stitches and staples removed. What a terrible ache they caused in my brain, yet within 1 hour, they were gone. It was such a significant advance. But this new laceration is added to the others. 14 arduous weeks later, we headed in for another appointment with my primary care physician. According to him, this is the most that can be done in terms of the neck brace. He told me that the brace will be removed today, but that I needed to take it easy since it would take my neck at least a year to fully recover from the injury. After he removes my brace, my neck feels as if it were made of mashed potatoes. It's almost as if I never had a neck in the first place since it's so mushy. After that, we were essentially like a hand-washing station for them. I was not given any more instructions. My neck brace had been removed, and this was my first time spending the night on my own. Because of the dreadful dreams and the stiffness, I was unable to fall or stay asleep. I was aware that in order to get through all of this, I was going to need assistance with the mental aspect of it, so I decided to start seeing a therapist. We worked on the PTSD as well as the anxiety. I went back to school and completed all of my requirements in October. I am now only experiencing symptoms of PTSD when the vehicle is jolted, and I am able to recognize warning indications when it begins to happen before it causes me to have tunnel vision. My anxiousness isn't completely gone, but it's far better than it used to be. This experience demonstrated to me how important it is to provide assistance to those who are in need. Stay present and don't try to escape the present by wishing it away since you don't know what the future holds. Be grateful for everything and everyone you have on your side, for when things are at their worst, these are the people who will always be there for you. The very last thing I found out was that despite the fact that I was physically alone, I have no doubt that I was defended and watched over by a guardian angel on that fateful night. I was in no way isolated from everyone else. I am grateful to my boyfriend for calling my mother as soon as he heard there was a problem, to my parents for getting out of bed in the middle of the night and driving all over the freeways in the area where the accident took place to look for me, to the people who came to visit me in the hospital and helped me afterward, to the nurse who called my mother, to the people who pulled over and helped me out of my car, to my guardians, and to myself. I am grateful that I had to go through so much difficulty in order to show me how incredible I can be. Now that I'm older, I make an effort to turn this day into a festive occasion. It might be challenging at times, and it can even be challenging on days that are not an anniversary, but with each passing year comes progress. It is said that God delivers his most difficult fights to the ones who are his strongest, and for this I am glad. The next video presents the second of today's near-death experiences. When I was 11 years old, my family and I went to San Diego for a vacation. We were having fun in the water by riding boogie boards, which are similar to surfboards. I went to the beach by myself and walked about. I am not really sure what happened, but I believe a wave pushed me off my board, and I recall being stuck underneath it while it felt extremely heavy. It was stuck in place, and for a split second I was filled with sheer terror. After that, I had a sense of calm. The world around me was pitch black, and all of a sudden, a flood of memories from throughout my life appeared to me in a tone of warm amber color. It was almost as if I was watching it, but I wasn't. It simply seemed to be in my thoughts, yet I could make out what was happening. I felt like going to sleep. I was liberated from the board in some way, and soon after that, I began hacking up water.